Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really significant book, Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions.
It's definitely one of those works that, well, it changes how you see things.
Absolutely. Our mission here is to unpack its core idea. If you think science is just this steady, step-by-step march towards truth, Kuhn basically says, think again.
Yeah, he throws a bit of a wrench in that smooth picture. He argues science goes through these huge disruptive breaks, revolutions, really.
Paradigm shifts, that's the term he coined, right?
That's the one. And to really get what a shift is, you first have to understand what's being shifted from, which brings us to the concept of the paradigm.
Okay, so what is a paradigm in Kuhn's view? Is it just the current theory?
It's much bigger than that. Think of it as the entire shared worldview of a scientific community at a particular time.
A worldview.
Yeah.
Like the basic assumptions they all agree on.
Exactly. It includes the accepted theories, yes, but also the methods they use, the tools, the kind of questions they think are valid to ask, even the standards for what counts as a successful solution. It's the whole framework.
The invisible rules of the game, almost.
Precisely. It defines the boundaries of their research, their thinking. Everything happens within it.
Okay, so if this paradigm is the established framework, then most science, day to day, must happen inside it. That's what Kuhn called normal science.
Correct. Normal science is, what almost all scientists do for almost all of their careers.
They're not trying to rock the boat.
Not at all. They're working within the paradigm. Kuhn described it as puzzle solving. The paradigm provides the puzzle picture and the pieces, and scientists work diligently to fit those pieces together.
So refining measurements, confirming predictions, extending the theory to new areas, that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. It's about making the existing paradigm work better, exploring its potential. It's very focused, very productive, usually.
But it sounds, well, a bit self-reinforcing. If you're only looking for things that fit the puzzle, what happens when something doesn't fit?
That's where the cracks start to appear. That's the emergence of anomalies.
The awkward results, the observations that just don't make sense under the current rules.
Right. The little bits of data that stick out that the paradigm can't easily explain.
Now, intuitively, you'd think finding an anomaly would immediately make scientists question the whole theory. But Kuhn says that's not what happens.
Not initially, no. In fact, the first reaction is usually resistance. Strong resistance.
They try to protect the paradigm.
Absolutely. Think about it. Their training, their careers, their reputations are often built on that paradigm. Questioning it is threatening.
So what do they do with these anomalies? Ignore them.
Sometimes. Or they try to explain them away. Maybe it was experimental error, maybe the equipment was faulty, or they try to tweak the existing theory just enough to accommodate the anomaly without challenging the core assumptions.
They try to patch it up, save the system.
Exactly. They'll often go to great lengths.
Like inventing a whole planet. You mentioned the example of Mercury's orbit before we started recording.
Yes. Before Einstein, Newtonian physics couldn't quite explain the precise orbit of Mercury. It was a persistent anomaly.
A little crack in Newton's magnificent system.
Right. So instead of questioning Newton's laws of gravity, what did many astronomers do?
They proposed, was it planet Vulcan?
Planet Vulcan. A hypothetical planet orbiting between Mercury and the Sun, whose gravity would supposedly account for the discrepancy.
They invented something just to make the existing theory work.
They did, and they searched for Vulcan for decades. It shows how reluctant people are to abandon a paradigm that has served them well.
But eventually patching things up isn't enough, right? What happens when the anomalies just keep coming?
That's when the paradigm enters a state of crisis. The anomalies pile up, the ad hoc adjustments become more and more convoluted, and confidence in the paradigm starts to erode. The puzzle-solving tools of normal science just aren't working anymore.
It becomes clear the framework itself might be the problem.
Yes, and that sense of crisis, that widespread dissatisfaction, is what opens the door for something radically new. And that radically new thing is the paradigm shift, the scientific revolution. This isn't just an update. It's a replacement.
A complete overthrow of the old way of thinking.
Exactly. A new theory or a whole new framework emerges that doesn't just explain the anomalies better, it offers a fundamentally different way of understanding that whole area of science.
So it's not like fixing a bug in the software. It's like installing a completely different operating system.
That's a great way to put it, because the shift changes everything. The fundamental concepts, the questions asked, the way experiments are interpreted, it all changes.
The lens through which scientists view that part of reality gets swapped out.
Completely. And this leads to another key Kuhnian idea, incommensurability.
Incommensurability, meaning they can't be measured against each other.
Pretty much. Proponents of the old paradigm and the new one are, in a sense, living in different worlds. They use the same words like mass or space, but the meanings have shifted so dramatically that they struggle to truly understand each other.
They're speaking different scientific languages.
In a very real way, yes, there's no neutral ground or simple experiment that can definitively prove one right and the other wrong in terms everyone agrees on. It requires a leap of faith, almost, to adopt the new view.
Wow. That makes those big historical shifts even more dramatic, like the Copernican revolution.
Oh, absolutely. For centuries, the paradigm was that the Earth was the center of everything. Geocentrism. It wasn't just science. It was embedded in philosophy, theology.
It was the bedrock of understanding the cosmos.
And Copernicus didn't just tweak the model. Proposing the sun was the center. Heliocentrism shattered that entire worldview. It fundamentally changed humanity's place in the universe.
It wasn't just an astronomical adjustment. It was a total conceptual upheaval.
A massive one. And think about Einstein's relativity challenging Newton.
Right. Newton's framework was incredibly successful for over 200 years. It seemed like the final word on mechanics, gravity, space, time.
It was a paradigm, solid as rock, taught everywhere, used for everything.
Until Einstein came along and said, well, actually, space and time aren't absolute and separate. They're relative, interwoven into space-time.
And that wasn't just a correction. It was a fundamental redefinition of the most basic concepts in physics. Mass, energy, time, gravity. They all meant something different after Einstein.
So a physicist trained before Einstein literally saw a different universe than one trained after.
In terms of their conceptual framework, yes. That's why Kuhn said old textbooks get rewritten, not just updated with new facts, but fundamentally replaced because the underlying language and concepts have changed. And this, for me, leads to one of the most fascinating and maybe controversial parts of Kuhn's work, the emphasis on the human element.
Right. We like to think of science as this purely logical, objective process. Just follow the data.
But Kuhn pulls back the curtain and shows us it's deeply social. It's done by communities of people.
People with beliefs, biases, training.
Exactly. And people who are often, understandably, resistant to having their entire worldview overturned. Paradigm shifts aren't just about data. They're about persuasion, community acceptance, and sometimes generational change.
So it's not always the best theory that wins immediately based on pure logic.
Logic plays a part, of course, but it's not the whole story. The transition is often messy, debated, even irrational at times. Think about a senior scientist who's built their entire career on the old paradigm.
Their research, their publications, their students, all based on that framework.
And then someone younger comes along saying, actually, the foundation you built on is wrong. That's a tough pill to swallow.
There's a lot of personal and professional investment in the status quo.
Huge investment. So resistance isn't just stubbornness, it's deeply rooted. Kuhn pointed out, somewhat bleakly perhaps, that sometimes a new paradigm doesn't fully triumph until the main defenders of the old one literally retire or die off.
Wow. Science advances one funeral at a time, as Max Planck supposedly said.
Something like that, yeah. It highlights that new ideas often need new minds, less committed to the old ways of seeing.
Okay, so this isn't just about physicists and astronomers centuries ago. This idea of paradigms and resistance to shifts applies, well, everywhere, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's why Kuhn is so relevant beyond science. Think about business, technology, politics, even our personal lives. We operate within frameworks.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Look at the shift in media you mentioned earlier, from owning physical things, records, DVDs, to streaming access.
Right. The old paradigm was owning a copy. Scarcity.
And the new one is access to everything. Abundance. But think about the resistance from the music and film industries initially.
They fought tooth and nail against digital distribution, treated it like an anomaly, a threat to be stamped out.
Exactly. They were trying to protect the old paradigm, the physical distribution model they understood and controlled. Until the pressure from anomalies like Napster and then new models like iTunes and streaming became overwhelming.
And they had to undergo a painful, revolutionary shift in their entire business model.
Precisely. So when you, listening now, find yourself fiercely defending an old way of doing things maybe in your job, or how you manage your finances, or even a long-held belief, despite evidence suggesting it's no longer working.
You might be caught in a paradigm crisis yourself.
You might be. And Kuhn points out that making the shift, letting go of that old framework, can feel incredibly disorienting. Everything feels unstable for a while.
But also potentially liberating, right?
Right.
Because the old rules might have been holding you back.
Exactly. The shift opens up entirely new possibilities that were unthinkable within the old paradigm. It's disruptive, yes, but Kuhn argues it's ultimately necessary.
Without these revolutions, we just keep refining the same old ideas within the same boundaries.
We'd never have those truly fundamental breakthroughs. Growth requires disruption. Hashtag tag outro.
So Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. It really goes far beyond just the history of science, doesn't it? It's fundamentally about change, how it happens, why it's resisted, and why it's ultimately essential.
It challenges that simple idea of linear progress and forces us to see knowledge and our attachment to it in a much more complex human way.
A reminder that what feels like solid ground, like obvious truth, might just be the current paradigm we happen to be standing in.
Exactly. And that leads us to the final thought we want to leave you with, drawing directly from Kuhn's insights about these frameworks we live inside.
Something to reflect on after this deep dive.
Ask yourself, what paradigms are you operating within right now? In your work, your beliefs, your relationships?
Which assumptions do you treat as completely unshakable facts?
And are there any anomalies, any inconvenient truths you've been dismissing or trying to rationalize away because they don't fit your current model?
What new lenses, what radically different ways of seeing might be waiting just over the horizon if you're willing to consider that the current framework might not be the whole story?